From Kyle, Texas, it's my dad, Marty Seldom Use Reserve Coleman. And from West Orange, New Jersey, it's Casey the Beef Cregan. I'm Parker Coleman, and it's time for the show you've been waiting for all week, Sluggo.
They never call me Mr. Touchdown, and I could not hit the curve. Just a classical bench warmer, just a seldom used reserve. If I could nail a jump shot or somehow hit the ball, I could have been a real contender. Not a never was at all. To somehow keep from getting cut, the only role I ever served. Never got to be a starter, just a seldom used reserve.
Casey, how about that little ditty from Mr. Judd Hare, who is on our Facebook group? He's one of us. How about that?
That's unreal, man. A professional intro to the show.
Can you believe it? We're only 10 shows in, and we've got barbecue sauce and a song.
We finally have something professional on this show. It's really great, but that was awesome. Thanks to Judd Hare for the intro. Wow, that was tremendous.
Hey, a little something about Judd. He and I have been going back and forth on Facebook a little bit, even prior to the last couple of days before I so nicely asked him to write a song for me. Boy, I don't take any liberties at all, do I? We've been going back and forth because he was also born in Charleston like myself, but he grew up in Clemson. He went to D.W. Daniel High School and Clemson. Now, his dad, check this out. His dad was the director of the infirmary, which eventually became Redfern, and you know that I spent some time in Redfern because I fell out of the top bunk and broke my wrist one night after one too many. And his dad was the sports physician at Clemson. And when you talk about lifelong Clemson, this is past lifelong. His mom and dad are buried on Cemetery Hill near Frank Howard, and so will he be. Now,
wow.
How's that for a Clemson guy?
Yeah, well, no, we don't have anything on this guy. Absolutely not. Like, he needs to just come take my mic.
No doubt. He's a really good guy, really good music. Now, I know you're a little bit younger than me, and you're probably still into music where they scream at you and you can't understand what they're saying. These days, I'm more into the tell me a story. That's Judd Hare. I'll put a link in the show notes so everybody can check out his work. He's on YouTube, but he says that's not his best work. It's on the Reverb Nation. So I'll put a link in the show notes for that.
That's awesome. He does good stuff too. And it's definitely singer-songwriter type stuff too. It's great.
Yeah, Saturday we were chatting back and forth on the old text, and I told you I was going to see a movie with the wife. We were getting away, and God bless my wife who goes to war movies with me, right? Happily goes to war movies with me. But the actual show was The Outpost, which is Daniel Rodriguez's story. Obviously, the story's not about him necessarily, but about his group of fellows that were the Battle of Kamdesh, right? And I wanted to just mention this. So this is an upbeat show, and we're going to talk about college football in a minute, but I think it's important. You know, we saw Daniel Rodriguez at Clemson. We saw the pilots that saved him out on the field one day, and it's very touching. But the story behind that is this battle, and it just wipes out. When you think sometimes war is glorified, this is a shocking movie that there is no glorification in this movie of war, and it shows what it's really about. As a veteran, I just wanted to bring that up. I recommend everybody go see it. The one little interesting kind of funny part was when I leaned over to my wife and said, that guy talks just like Daniel Rodriguez. Well, it was Daniel Rodriguez, moron. He's actually in the movie. So very interesting. But 8 U.S. soldiers died. I just wanted to quickly say their name. We'll move on to more fun stuff. But as a veteran, again, I felt like I wanted to put these guys' names out here because sometimes the ones that died are forgotten because the ones that are receiving all the medals, get a lot of recognition. But the 8 folks that died that day, Americans, were Justin T. Gallegos, Christopher Griffin, Kevin C. Thompson, who I believe was Daniel Rodriguez's best friend, the one he promised to play college football for. Michael Scusa, who's from New Jersey, by the way. Vernon W. Martin, Stephen L. Mace, Joshua Kirk, and Joshua Hart, H-A-R-D-T. So those 8 guys are the ones who died. It's a great movie, and as I was telling you and Locks earlier, it is a very sobering thought when you have a 14-year-old son and you have stepsons that age and a younger son, that they're not that far away from the age of these young men, most of them, when they died.
Yeah, and fortunately and unfortunately, we knew this story a little bit, especially when Daniel Rodriguez was able to walk on to Clemson, and he carried the flag on Military Day, and so a lot of those folks that heard his story because of the fandom to Clemson, and we did know the story, and I think you were right with the Kevin Thompson being his best friend. But what a story! What a sad day. I'm glad you actually said the 8 names because they do deserve their due. And but that's cool. That's cool that they did a movie on this story, because it wasn't the best day, and we lost a lot of kids that day, as you say. And yeah, those are always tough. So I'm even struggling to talk about it because those are always tough.
It is tough. I thought I might break up over it. My dad was in World War II, and he was injured, and he had Purple Hearts and all kind of awards. But he always told me growing up that war is not glorious. So don't believe what you see in the movies. And that's always stuck with me my entire life. All right, now on to some better and more fun things to talk about. Casey, I'm going to let you introduce our guest this week, because you know him much more than I do, because I don't know him at all besides Locks.
Yeah, so joining us this week is my co-host on the Chop and Beef Show, but also a guy that, funny little backstory before I welcome him in. He goes by the name of Locks now, because back maybe 5 years ago, he liked to gamble with my money and never got any picks right. Never, not a single one. But after, a couple adult beverages, I would buy in hook, line, and sinker to him. He'd be like, dude, it's a lock. So I would always bet it and lose. He was gambling with my money. Anyway, so I had him on my show back a couple of years ago, and he started hitting. I'm talking to the clip of like 63% win percentage, which is better than almost professional gamblers. So then I had him on as a joke so that he would continue to lose, but the guy started doing research and everything, and he's been winning. So I'm bringing him here. This is my doing to bring him here to kind of give a little professionalism and some credence to our picks and our show. So we're going to have him here when we're doing our preseason picks. Well, I'd love to welcome in Zach Locks Parker from Pooler, Georgia, near Savannah. Hey. Welcome in, guy. Thanks for being with us.
It's kind of hot in here. I'm blushing a little bit after that intro. That was pretty solid. Thanks there, Beef. Thank you, Marty. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here. Very, very excited. I'd like to add like one thing. If you think about it, you've probably seen it like in cartoons and movies when you see the main character trying to make a decision, and there's an angel on one shoulder and there's a devil on the other shoulder. Definitely not the angel when it comes to Beef's betting. So I'm usually the devil on the side going, yeah, go ahead and take that long shot. You can do it. You'll get it. Yeah, that's kind of where this whole thing started for the two of us.
My favorite thing though was a little side story, real quick, was 60. We were playing Georgia Tech, and the over-under was like 70, and we were scoring. This was probably the Taj Boyd era. And we were scoring like 100 again. I mean, we were scoring at will. We're coming back from 35 points down. Georgia Tech ran that offense. We couldn't stop. So he's like, bet the over. At halftime, I think it was like 7-6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, that was case in point.
That was, yeah. That was in a nutshell. It was a lock at that time.
Did you tell him lock over or lock under? I mean, it could make a difference, right?
I definitely picked over that day. Yeah. So, my fault. Fortunately, Beef's not known to, lay down like hundreds of dollars. It's a little lower side, which is fine. But hey, there's nothing quite like gambling with someone else's money. I love it personally.
Well, and here's what I'm learning. Here's what I'm learning about Beef during this conversation. He said you never won, and he decided to name you Locks. I can't. What the hell?
Because he would always say it's a lock.
It's a lock.
Lock it in. Lock it in.
Let's lock it in. Lock it in. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I promise I've gotten better in my past 5
Way
years.
better. Way better.
Well, there's no pressure being on the show talking about point spreads and having the name Locks. So don't worry about it. Nobody's going to expect anything at whatsoever, right?
Yep,
All right.
no pressure.
Welcome in, Zach. Hey, Casey, you wanted to talk about some preseason rankings. You told me earlier in the week this was your favorite thing in the whole wide world, and you had maybe a 20-second rant on it.
This is my Manny Diaz. This to me is the Manny Diaz to you. Preseason polls prove that there's a bias out there. Okay, there's always 19 SEC teams in the preseason poll. I know there's only 14 teams, but they always seem to. My point is, see, this is where I always go off. I'm sorry. There's no reason for a preseason poll. I hate them. I know it's fodder. Every blue check mark on Twitter tells me it's for fodder and they need to have something to start off. But it also starts a bias. So a Texas A&M team that starts out 3, say they lose two of their first 3 games, they're only going to drop to, 17, right? Rather than if they were 1 and 2 and they're up against other 1 and 2 teams after week 3, say, or week 4, say, then you balance them then. Because they start at 3, they only drop to like 14. I'm using Texas A&M as an example. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be Clemson for all that matters. I just don't like preseason polls at all. It is literally the bane of my existence, and I could probably do 45 minutes of talking to myself about it.
You probably have. Well, here's the thing. I agree with you 100% because I always laugh at the, hey, look on the end of the year, you'll see like Clemson beat number 6, Texas A&M, but really they were 6-6, but they were number 3 when they played in the second game of the year because they beat Louisiana Lafayette 142-6 in the first game. So I agree with you. It doesn't quite bother me the way it bothers you, and that's probably because Clemson is, near the top of those polls and typically doesn't lose anymore. That's a great point. It probably would have bothered me more in 2008 and 7 than it does today.
Well, I think you're exactly right. I think that's when it's probably started for me, was that even back then when we started, there was 1 year that Clemson started number 9 and played in the Peach Bowl. It was the preseason Peach Bowl against an Alabama team that was unranked. Now, Clemson got their doors blown off that day and didn't deserve to be ranked 9th. And they only dropped to like 18 or something like that. No, they should have been below. Obviously, there's no reason to even put them at 9. It should have been level playing field. Obviously, Alabama's better because we don't know from year to year in college how good these teams are going to be. Yes, Trevor Lawrence is back for Clemson. Justin Fields is back. You think they're going to be good, but there's attrition. There's injuries. There's things that happen. There's kids that aren't playing this year. There's certain things that just go on that you can't – they're not apples to apples before the season starts. Now, I know I still have to step back and say, like I said before, it's fodder. It's something for us to talk about on this show. It's something for people on the internet to argue about, that why is Tennessee 17 to start out the year? They lost to whoever they lost to last year, Georgia State. But I just can't stand it. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know when they should come out. Some people say week 4. Some people say week 6. Guess what? I know I have to deal with it. It's not ever going to change. That's just my rant.
Okay, Locks, you're used to Beef's rants. Is Beef right about this rant, or is he wrong? What's your thought?
I think he's wrong because I love it. I mean, I do. I think it's fantastic. Maybe it's part of me just because I like to see him riled up. But you got to have something to talk about. And, he asked, like, when is the best time for this to start? The best time for this to start is when the whistle blows at the last play of the national championship game. That every year is when the way too early preseason football rankings come out. And it happens every year, and it's not going to change because people like us, people that listen to the show, love college football, and they're already looking forward to what could happen next year. Like Georgia fans. But it,
3 losses.
One thing that I want to mention though too, with the preseason rankings, what is going on every year with Texas A&M and their preseason ranking? They start off so high last year, and like Beef said, it carries through the season. They had 5 losses and were in the top 25 last year, were they not? And they did have a tough schedule. They are already like preseason ranked. It's like Phil Steele, I had them at like 5 or something like that, and that does carry some weight. So I don't understand what it is with A&M, but I don't think they're that good this year. But
here's the fun thing. They got this same ABC bump that North Carolina got, almost beat Clemson. So gotta be moved up. Yeah, ABC almost beat Clemson. But here's the irony of this whole thing, and this is why this is hilarious. Beef is ranting about people talking about preseason polls. Can I ask you who put this on the agenda? Who decided we were going to talk about this? The guy that didn't want to talk about it, that doesn't want anybody else to talk about it.
A little bit.
Yeah, I know. It just bothers me so much that sometimes I need to get things out. And so I'll put it on an agenda just to get it out there because it makes me feel a lot better. Like I don't know why, it just riles me up so much. And it's that bias that Locks was talking about with Texas A&M. They had 5 losses. They had no business of being in the top 25, but they lost, almost beat Clemson. They lost by 14. Who we can? They dropped 3 spots. They lose to Alabama by 30. They drop 6 spots. But if they start at 3, they can keep dropping 6 spots. And I'm not a math major, but they're still in the top 25 after 4 losses. So it just that's the stuff that they shouldn't have been in the top 25 after 1 loss, maybe. Or like I said, I don't know when you started it, but it's mind blowing to me.
Well, where are your therapy session, Beef? Go ahead and rant. We'll send you. We'll need your copay. And I do agree with you. And this is a side not on the agenda, but one year I devised a system where every team started equal, and every week the teams were re-ranked based on who beat who, right? And I had it all figured out. I had a program running this thing, and it was great, and I forgot about it. I don't know. I couldn't find it when I went back to look for it. But basically, in my system, everybody started equal, right? So the first week, no matter who you beat, you only got credit for beating the average team because everybody was average. They were in the middle. And then it slowly worked its way out over the year. Maybe I need to go back to that someday when I retire to the old folks' home.
I think that's my point, though. I think it is what makes a schedule strong. Is it? I know, and I harp on the SEC, but they've been riding this narrative since Tim Tebow was at Florida that they are so strong. There was only a couple of years removed from the SEC East being the laughingstock to college football, but they still ride the narrative that they're high and mighty. So why are we still riding that? The cream will rise to the top. The top 4 teams will rise to the top. The LSU last year, Clemson being on top, they rose to the top based on their schedule, based on their record. You are what your record says you are. So at 0-0, that you're already putting a bias in people's minds by putting even Clemson at number 1. You're putting a bias that they're the number 1 team in the nation. Ohio State, before they canceled in the Big Ten, you're putting them at number 2. Alabama, but are they? We don't know yet. That's the thing. Like how tough is the schedule? That's what we don't really know that until week 6. What happens if quarterbacks go down? Sage Surratt's not playing at Wake Forest this year. Are they going to be any good? Are they going to have anybody that can catch the football for them this year? We don't know. I'm done. I am really done this time.
He's done, Locks. Done. And here's the good news. He won't have any opinion on our next topic, which is the SEC schedule, which came out a couple of days ago. Now, I really don't have an opinion. I lied. I got one opinion. South Carolina, 3-7 over under. Locks?
I mean, look at the schedule. That is pretty dead on. There's not a lot of hope in Columbia, and that's okay.
Beef.
I feel bad for them. I mean, I don't know what these teams are going to be, but on paper, if I were to judge them for what I think they're going to be, 3 wins is going to be awful tough to get. But they'll probably surprise us and beat a team they shouldn't, and then they're going to go ahead and lose to a team that they shouldn't. But opening up with Tennessee, that's going to be a barometer for them right off the bat, I think. But as far as the schedule goes, nothing flew off the table with me. I did just get off the phone with a guy from Texas A&M, and he had a little comment before he left the conversation saying that they have 2 back-to-back games, one with Florida and one with Alabama in week 2 and week 3. That looks like they may struggle with. Otherwise, their schedule that came out the last time that they released a new schedule, they looked like on paper they would have been 10-0 going into an LSU or an Alabama type game. So nothing flew off the table. I mean, the SEC is the SEC. They made it a deal the other night, putting on the SEC network. I watched because what else was I going to do? The SEC is the SEC.
Yeah, I was. My only thought was South Carolina got lucky because no non-conference games. You don't have to look out for Appalachian State or East Carolina or one of those places. Locks, any takes on the SEC schedule as a whole besides the easy road for some of the higher end teams?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at it actually just before we started, and it looked to me, just by matchups of the top teams, I think Florida has the easiest path out of the higher grade teams, out of Bama, out of Georgia. Florida basically just has LSU at home and UGA in Jacksonville. They don't have an Auburn, they don't have an Alabama, whereas UGA has Auburn, Bama, Tennessee, and Florida. And the same kind of revolving door with Bama has A&M at home, which probably isn't going to be a big deal. UGA at LSU and Auburn. So with Florida, with just 2 of the higher, ranked teams or higher ranked opponents, I think they have an easier path, quite honestly. It's all going to come down to the game versus Georgia, which it usually does. But if they can pull that off, they may end up in the championship game.
Yeah, there is a lot of love for Florida out there, and there's somebody in our little Facebook group that really was pushing Florida last night, I think it was. And I'm not a believer in Florida, but listening to you and have to take their schedule into consideration, maybe I should be a believer.
The one thing that I think is strange this year is home field advantage. Is there going to really be a home field advantage? I mean, the crowd's not going to be as large, or if even at all. The only thing you have to really worry about is travel. And it's a conference schedule, so you're not going to go terribly far. It's just going to be a little bit inconvenient. That would be it. But so it's really going to be pretty much even fields everywhere you go. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, that's the only thing that stuck out to me was Florida. I'm not high on them or anything, but it's just one thing that I saw.
Maybe heat might be the only home field advantage, but in the SEC, a lot of teams are playing in the Southeast. So, but that Florida Gator Stadium, the Swamp, it's named the Swamp for a reason. I think it has very little to do with the actual alligators where they live. It is swampy in that place.
And speaking of no fans, I have already asked a question: is it going to be the same watching on TV with it totally quiet when there's a one-handed grab on the sideline with 3 seconds to go in a tie game, in field goal range? It's just going to be totally weird. I don't notice it so much in the baseball games because it's baseball, right? And it's totally different. But I think we're going to notice it a lot more in football. And God, please let the announcers talk about football and not what they have on the wall behind them at home or whatever cave they're in. It's going to be wild in a calm way, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Hey, let's talk about a real schedule, fellas.
Whew.
Clemson announced that they're taking on the Citadel this year. So that's the non-conference game. I'm sure Clemson would have much rather had South Carolina on the schedule, but, SEC didn't see fit to allow their teams to play a non-conference game. So at least we keep the traditional FCS foe in-state and they're agreeing to the ACC medical protocols and all that. Beef, I know you probably don't have much of a take on this game, but tell me what you're thinking.
Weren't they on the schedule already? The original schedule, but when that
Yes,
came out?
in November, yes.
And good, because that's my take on this is I like the fact that they're sticking to the original contract, that it is a payday for the Citadel to come to Death Valley and play. No fans, or no, very little fans as far as we know right now. Keep it an in-state, helping the little guy out. Those kids, they normally play it pretty well, and for a little while anyway. I mean, those kids are athletes. I like the game. I do. Is it an easy one that Clemson should win by 60? Yeah, it is. But you know what? Give everyone an opportunity. Give those Citadel kids an opportunity to play a big boy that they were going to lose out on this year, and then give the third and fourth string Clemson guys that weren't going to play much in some of the bigger games a chance to play more. I think
Hey, Beef, don't tell South Carolina this is an easy game, please, because they've traditionally struggled with the Southern Conference Bulldogs. Locks, any thoughts?
I agree. It's great to keep it in the state. What were the choices? South Carolina State, Furman, Citadel. I mean, it's fine, and it is a big deal to these smaller schools, to the kids at the smaller schools coming into playing in Death Valley. They may get that opportunity once every 4 years, or however the rotation is for these lower tier games. But it's cool that they at least are going to get the opportunity to come in. So yeah, it'll be fun to see. I'm glad they decided it, and we're moving on. Keeping the schedule and the rotation going.
Yeah, I think that was originally supposed to be the military weekend at Clemson, the military game appreciation day, and it makes sense to keep them on the schedule, and I'm glad it worked out that way. Okay, Locks, it's now your time to shine. We're going to talk about conference champions and playoffs and national champion. We're going to start out with the ACC. I'll start off on this one, just so give you all time to think about who's going to win the ACC, all the possibilities, projections, all 15 teams. Clemson. I say Clemson. Beef?
Well, I looked pretty deep at this one, so deep that I didn't look at it all. Unfortunately, I tried. I wanted to be a little different, go against the grain, put it out there, get some fodder on our discussion group, call me an idiot, whatever it may be. I couldn't find it here at the ACC. I just can't. I think Clemson just is dominant at every position. I don't care about the turnover and all of the attrition that they lost, even with losing an Isaiah Simmons. I think they're at the point where they're just reloading, and we just don't know some of the names that we're going to know by the end of the season. So I think it's all Clemson in the ACC.
Hey, speaking of the discussion group, 98% chose Clemson. There was only one non-Clemson vote. Some lunatic, I think he was just goofing around. Not sure who that was. Beef. It was the Beef. 98% chose Clemson. Now, all of these polls are skewed toward Clemson because most of the folks in that group are Clemson. We're trying to promote it to folks outside of Clemson because we want a rounded group and more opinions than just Clemson folk. But 98% chose Clemson. You and I chose Clemson. And now we're going to get the lock. Locks, ACC champion.
Yeah, I'm going to go along the same lines here, but a little twist to it. I think Clemson's getting lucky that they're going to Notre Dame with little to no fans. This would probably be one of the largest regular season games that they've had in quite some time away. So getting that stadium that holds probably over 100,000, I think, a rabid, drunk Irish faithful in there, I think is lucky. And let's not forget too, Notre Dame is a very good team too. Returning, Ian Book had a solid year last year, a little let down, but he's a seasoned quarterback. And they also returned their offensive line. I look for the regular season game to be very close. And I also look for them to also both play each other in the ACC championship and Clemson to win it. But I think both games will be tight. And that will come into play later.
So no, That's what you call a tease, folks. Hey, so nobody's given any credence to some of the teams that are getting a lot of pub in the offseason, like North Carolina, and I've even heard some Pittsburgh talk.
I tried. I really did try. I looked hard at North Carolina. I didn't look at Pittsburgh. I skipped right over them because I'm hearing Virginia Tech also, and I'm also hearing a little Miami, and I think that has a lot to do with the Eric King. But I literally tried. I tried to look at North Carolina going line by line, position by position. And yes, Sam Howell is as talented as they come as far as a quarterback, and he's a sophomore. He's going to probably take a step up from where he was last year, and he was very good. I still don't think they match up well with Clemson. I think they caught Clemson napping a little bit, reading their press clippings and all those other cliches last year. I don't think that's going to happen again if they meet up.
They're getting the ABC bump. Locks, what you got? North Carolina, Pittsburgh? Any thoughts?
I would have mentioned North Carolina last year. They did finish 7-6. That surprised me. Actually, I thought they had at least 8 wins, but they didn't. But those 6 losses, they only lost by 7 points or less in all 6 of those losses. So they were a good team. There might have been a lot of shine with Mac Brown's first year, rally around the coach. Plus, obviously, their quarterback, like Beef said, is great and up and coming. But I agree, they don't match up enough to really pose a real threat. I don't think so. Yeah, I didn't look at Pittsburgh either. I don't see that one coming in.
Okay, Beef, I got to get something straight with you right now. If Locks is going to be a regular contributor, he cannot do research. That is not allowed. We don't do research on this show, Locks. We just throw crap against the wall and see what sticks. I'm just joking. I got some research coming up in just a minute. There's another tease. All right, SEC. Looked like Alabama and Georgia were the 2 really big considerations here. A little bit of Florida love. Locks might be choosing Florida. I went with Alabama because I think they're really, really good. And Kirby Smart hasn't proved to me he knows when to punt yet. So until that happens, I'm going to go with Alabama. What you got, Beef?
I'm going off the grid, completely off the grid here, and probably off my rocker, but hear me out. I'm picking Texas A&M to win the SEC. Marty about spit his water out of his mouth right there.
Wait a second. Whoa. You just spent 15 minutes ranting about them being ranked number 3.
I was trying to go against the grain. Let's let the cat out of the bag, pull the curtain back, whatever it may be. Yes, Alabama, Georgia, all those boys. I was looking for something different. I was honestly looking for something different in the ACC. I didn't find it. Like I speak about how I always look at the opponents of the Clemson and always build them up a little bit the week of the game. I'm doing that here with Texas A&M. I did some research earlier. Their defense is getting perennially better every year. They're getting better. They need to be somewhat solid. They were in the top half of the SEC total last year at 7th, and they were 8th the year before, so they're moving up. Maybe this year will be 6th. They return their top 4 tacklers on defense. 7 of the top 8 of their defense is back. All seniors and juniors, experience on the last level, the DBs, the safeties. Their senior quarterback, Kellen Mond, I don't like him at all, but he's a senior. He's played 36 games as starter. I love Spiller because he wears number 28 and he's a running back for them. They have their leading receiver coming back, and the schedule, other than week 2 and week 3, which I discussed before with Alabama and Florida, lines up perfectly for them. So if they can squeak by those games, now that's tough. They could be, truthfully, they have open with Vandy, blowout, Alabama, Florida. Then they have Mississippi State, Arkansas, South Carolina, Tennessee, Ole Miss before they play LSU. I just think it lines up really well for them. I'm picking them to win the SEC. Write it down. Put it on the page.
Let me summarize. Other than Florida and Alabama back-to-back and a terrible quarterback, they're looking good. Hey, Kellen Mond's a great quarterback when you're down 27-3. When it's 27-24, not so good.
No,
Locks.
He misses all his targets when he's down by 3.
Locks, what you got for the SEC?
Beef, don't put any money down on that game. On a futures bet there, please, for him. Sorry, they're perennial just jokers. And I'll tell you, you talk about a school that's really going to hate missing their home crowd. That place is berserk, and not having them all there, it's going to hurt them. But let's just stop talking about Texas A&M. I'm in Georgia. I'm surrounded by Georgia people all the time that pump their tires at my office constantly. The SEC schedule came out and it was like, well, week 2, we got the week 4. I was like, here we go. So that being said, I think there's a lot of pressure on UGA. I do. Like you said, Kirby Smart, for everything that he's known for, it hasn't been a championship yet. And I don't think this is the year either. I think UGA's schedule is tough. Not a lot of people are talking about Auburn. I think Auburn could get them early too. They're at Alabama. I think that's a loss. I think you can count Georgia out of the SEC championship game. And like I said earlier, I do see Florida with an easier path there. I see Alabama playing Florida, Alabama taking it home, which is no big surprise. But I think Florida, I guess I don't really have a dog in a fight, but I think they're going to be better off than Florida. Than Georgia in this case. So I'll take them.
All right, so Alabama, Florida, and you picked Alabama to win. 72% of the folks on the discussion board also picked Alabama. Not surprisingly, the closest poll of the 3 conferences that manned up and are playing was the Big 12. Oklahoma got 56% of the vote. They got my vote. And this is another one for me. Until Texas does it, or until they get that 9-star quarterback that just committed to them, until he's in there actually playing, I'm taking Oklahoma till I see something different. Do you realize how many – I don't know off the top of my head, but do you realize how many Big 12 titles Oklahoma has compared to Texas probably in the last 15 years? I bet it's like 13-2. I'll take Oklahoma in the Big 12. Who you got, Beef?
Well, I didn't know if anybody knows this, but there's other teams in the Big 12 other than Oklahoma and Texas.
There is?
But I decided to pick Oklahoma State. 19 returning starters, including probably arguably one of the best running backs in the country in Chuba Hubbard. They got 8 returners on offense. Spencer Sanders, he had a good first year. He's coming back. They don't play defense, so I didn't even look at Oklahoma State's defense. I love Mike Gundy. Well, I did before he was ignorant this past year. Their wide receiver, Tylan Wallace, is the stud. I just going against the grain again because I don't want to talk about the same old, and I'm picking Oklahoma State.
That's called bad betting.
Now we know why I always lost, right?
Just want to be different. Okay, Locks, who you got? Bring some sense back to this conversation, Locks.
It's Oklahoma, and I couldn't look any other way too, like Beef said, but it's not Texas playing them in the championship game. It is Oklahoma State. I agree. Chuba Hubbard is awesome. They do have, like you said, 19 returning starters, seasoned veteran team, and Texas is going to have to do something to make me believe. I got high on them about 2 years ago. Felt really good. I started following them, picking them, and they let me down like 4 out of 5 games in the year. And like every time I picked them to win, they would lose. Every time they would lose, I picked them to win. Like just vice versa. So I'm still not a believer in Texas. Maybe this is their year, but I just don't see it. They're like Clemson when Clemson was Clemsoning.
Exactly.
Is that a sentence?
Yes.
So but you know what I mean? Yeah, they're Texasing. It's just not there yet. So
Texas for me is like Georgia for you. I live, a few miles from DKR, and you hear all this stuff every year and how great they're going to be. Let me spit some facts for you. Guess how many Big 12 titles Texas has won since the conference was started in 1996?
One?
Very close. It's 3. It's 3.
Okay.
They won the first one in 96. Of course, they won in 2005 when they won the national championship, and they won in 2009.
Oh, wow.
Oklahoma's won the last 5 and 12 overall. So Good luck with your bet there. And Oklahoma State, Casey, has won, and that was in 2011. I'm even surprised at that.
What was that, Michael Crabtree? I know that he was Texas Tech. I don't even remember who was on that team in 2011.
But
Lee
anyway,
Parker here for our historian, our show historian, tell me who was on that 2011 Oklahoma State team.
okay, so we've made our conference picks, and I'll put those up on a social media graphic for everybody to laugh at and make fun of us, because that's what we do here. And to put them there out there for perpetuity. Can I say that without screwing it up? Obviously not. Hey, I'm gonna spit some facts at you guys. We talk playoffs now. I did some Zach Locks Parker research here. Interesting facts. 71% of playoff teams have been named Clemson, Alabama, Oklahoma, or Ohio State. So we can take out Ohio State out of there, right?
Yeah.
This is even better one. 67% of the champions, and we're talking the playoff era here, and 67% of the runners-up have either been named Clemson or Alabama. So Big 12 and Pac-12 teams have a combined record of 1-6 in the playoff era. And, of course, Oklahoma leads that with their big fat 0-4. Oregon won the first ever playoff game. Pac-12 hadn't won another one since. They haven't had many opportunities, but they still haven't won any. So we talk about crazy, wild, and nutty college football. Every year, we end up with the same teams. It doesn't matter if Casey picks Texas A&M or Oklahoma State. We're going to have the same teams, right? My playoff picks are this. 1 seed Clemson, 2 Alabama, 3 Oklahoma, and I say Georgia sneaks in as the 4th seed, and Locks and I are already going against each other here. Let's start there. Casey, who's your 4 playoff teams?
Fun fact, I was in attendance to that Oregon victory at the Rose Bowl against Florida State in 2014. But my 4 playoff teams are as asinine as my picks. I have Clemson, Oklahoma State, obviously, for winning the Big 12, Texas A&M, obviously, for picking the winning the SEC, and Florida.
You know what I say about that? You should let Locks make your picks. Because I don't think that's what he would pick. Locks, what you got?
I think I'd probably take one of those 4 there, Beef. I'll let you decide which one. I'm pretty well in line with you, Marty. 1 Clemson, 2 Bama, 3 Oklahoma, 4 Notre Dame. I think this could be the year that Clemson loses to Notre Dame at Notre Dame. That being a 1-loss Notre Dame, when Clemson comes back and beats them in the championship game, is going to get into the 4th spot. And then Clemson is going to play Notre Dame 3 times this year because they'll play 1 versus 4.
Oh, man. I hate it, but I love it.
Yeah, it's just it's a different outcome. I don't know. It could seriously happen too. I think I could be completely wrong. It could be Florida instead of Notre Dame. I just don't think it's going to be Georgia though.
Has there ever been a time that a college football team played another 3 times in a year?
I really don't know. That's a great one to look up.
I'm thinking maybe back in 1894 when it was Yale and Harvard were 2 of the 3 college football teams that probably played each other each week, right? Yeah. Beef, what do you think about Locke's playoff picks?
Oh, they're perfect. He was different in the way that I wanted to be different, and I wasn't different, but makes a lot of sense. I don't like losing to Notre Dame in anything, especially where I am located geographically. No, I'm not in the Midwest, but everyone knows somebody who knew somebody who met somebody whose brother, sister's uncle went to Notre Dame, and that's why they're a fan here. A lot of Irish Catholics here in the Northeast, so they jump aboard. So I have to hear about them all the time. But the one team that I don't want to lose to is them. But I like it. I like the scenario. It works this year, right? Marty, you didn't like the fact that they could play for the ACC championship.
Yeah.
Box basically said they're winning the ACC championship and then losing in the playoffs.
Yeah, I would be beef mad if Notre Dame walked in and won the ACC championship. That would just cap off 2020, right? Like, it's perfect. It's just been one of those years. The Facebook group picked Georgia at 59% to be the 4th playoff team. But interestingly enough, Casey, Oklahoma State was second in that poll at 22%. So some folks are thinking along with you, and that scares me to even say it out loud.
I'll get on my Army before too long on the Facebook group, the base Army right here, right?
In my semifinal, I had Clemson over Georgia and Alabama over Oklahoma, which the Facebook group agreed with, 92% on Clemson over Georgia, 95% Alabama over Oklahoma. I'm surprised it was only 95% because Oklahoma cannot stay with Alabama. And in the championship game, it was Clemson over Alabama, 95%. Like, okay, we're skewed toward Clemson on the Facebook group. We know that, but we're trying to get better. I asked them to please pick who you think will win the game, not who you want to win the game. I think Locks was one of the folks who picked Alabama. I'll take Clemson, but not at a 95% confidence interval. Who do you have in the championship, Casey, in your wild scenario fantasy world you live in?
I had Clemson beating Florida, Oklahoma State beating Texas A&M, so Clemson and Oklahoma State in the final.
Who you got with it?
Oh, Clemson. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No worries.
I went back to the home.
Right.
You know, cream rises to the top thing.
Back to reality.
Dabo will ride a unicorn up onto the stairs to get the trophy.
Locks, remind me of your picks in the semifinal, Locks.
I have Clemson playing Notre Dame for the third time, and Clemson winning the game, and Alabama playing Oklahoma. Alabama winning the game. Clemson, Alabama, part 11. And I'll take Clemson to take it home. No surprise.
Okay, here's the shocker. All three of us took Clemson, right? We got them out there in weirdly different ways, with you two going Notre Dame 3 times and Oklahoma State. Okay, but we got there, right? We all got to the same place. Clemson, we predicting a national champion. And I'll be honest, I talked to Casey about this before we started recording. Up until last week, my pick for the national champion was going to be Ohio State. You guys agree or disagree? Casey?
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that game would have scared me anyway, regardless of who they were. But to play them again, as hungry as they are, as much as they had coming back, Justin Fields, Dan Hope a couple weeks ago told us about the scoreboard that they have in the locker room that they were looking at every day. I just think they were loaded on both sides of the ball. Even without Chase Young, they were probably going to be better on the defensive side of the ball than they were last year. Like you and I talked about pre-show, they beat Clemson up and down the field physically through the first, 32 minutes of that game. I think that was a safe bet to say Ohio State was going to be the favorite.
Locks?
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree, and I'm glad to see that the Big Ten's not playing, because I grew up in Ohio too for the first 18 years of my life, and I still have plenty of people that would have loved to have hit me up in some type of message through Facebook or on text and rub that in my face, because there were some fighting words at the end of the game last year. So I wasn't looking forward to a rematch at all. What it is.
It is what it is. Apparently, they haven't told any of they had a secret vote and didn't tell any of the coaches and athletic directors in the Big Ten. And we were thankful for that, because there might have been some pushback if they had. Hey, I mentioned I'm going to do a social media graphic for this, and we are going to make picks during the season. As you can see, we have a rollicking good time when we have Locks on the podcast, on the show. And we're going to be playing for charities. Casey's going to be playing for the National MS Society. I'm going to be playing for Partnerships for Children. And Zach Locks Parker will be playing for the Georgia Animal Rescue and Defense. It's a winner take all, or a winner's charity take all. We're going to all donate a agreed upon amount of money and donate it to the winner's charity. And I appreciate you guys agreeing to do that. Just makes it a little more fun, and while we're doing some good, instead of just shooting the bull here on this podcast.
Sounds good.
I don't know how we can.
I was going to say my charity is already looking forward to your money.
And if it was up to, I was going to say if it was up to my wife, she'd be giving money to an animal fund too. We've got every animal rescued that I think has ever been rescued is in this house somewhere. But Casey, I appreciate you and Locks agreeing to do that for me. It seems like the right thing to do. We can all afford a dollar or two to help a good cause out.
Absolutely, and I don't know how we can do it, but we'd love to get the Facebook group involved as well. Maybe not even financially, just to get us some competition, I guess. Obviously, it's going to be the three of us at the end of it, but to vote on what we're doing or give your own picks for the week, beat the hosts kind of thing. But yeah, I look forward to it, and it is for great causes and ones that are near and dear to each of us. So I'm looking forward to it as well. That's one of the reasons I really want college football, other than selfishly because I love it and that's what I do on Saturdays. But it will be nice, and I'll make a little bit more, probably better picks during the season. Otherwise, the National MS Society is not going to receive it now, and that's not the point. So.
No doubt. All for good causes and a lot of fun, and just competition between the three of us. As you can see from the first show, we're going to have a good time. Hey, before we go, Casey, I wanted to mention Turgey and the guys at the Pit Boss Sauce Company, and once again thank Ellis Tolbert over at 4th and 16 Sports. His show simulcast every Tuesday on Seldom Used Reserve. What a great guest, a great guy, very knowledgeable about football. Those two guys are rock solid, and we appreciate having them along for the ride.
Yeah, absolutely. I love having Thursday be. I got a badge today for one of the top supporters on his Facebook page, so I appreciate that, and we do love his sauce. I mean, it's tough to not pimp something out when you don't like it. We actually really thoroughly enjoy it, so I'm happy that he's involved with us. We're involved with him, and then obviously Ellis Tolbert. I was blowing smoke up his tail for the entire 45 minutes last week. I thoroughly enjoy his stuff. Love that people support him, and of course we could always use more.
Well, and here's the thing: I put those two in contact after the show last week. They're 1.7 miles apart. Had no idea. Physically, 1.7 miles apart in Greenville, South Carolina. So both those are good guys and good sauce and a good show. Zach Locks Parker, thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate it, Zach. All right.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Casey, we're going to let Judd take us out, but before that, producer Amy would like to hear from you.
Producer Amy, how'd we do tonight?
I think that sounds pretty good.
They never call me Mr. Touchdown, and I could not hit the curve. Just a classical bench warmer, just a seldom used reserve. If I could nail a jump shot or somehow hit the ball, I could have been a real contender. Not a never was at all. To somehow keep from getting cut, the only role I ever served. Never got to be a starter, just a seldom used reserve.